Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbaum.
And this is The View from the U. Brian, couldn't do it last week. College visits. I was everywhere. You were everywhere. We're back this week. Let's talk some college football.
Let's talk
top 25 polls.
Let's talk the top 25 polls. Mike, you and I aren't on exact the best terms with the committee right now. I mean, of course, they take our opinion heavily into account here at The View from the U. But again, there's a couple things here and there. Mike will open up with your rant about the Notre Dame-Arizona State situation.
And I realize this, Brian. People are going to think I come off as a Notre Dame homer. That is partially true. But if you look at this objectively, the fact that Notre Dame didn't move up a spot in the polls despite beating Navy, and you can say that Navy was a good team, that's a game they should have won, but you should still move up in the polls by beating a team. I also don't agree with the fact that Notre Dame is playing Arizona State this weekend and that Arizona State is only marginally better than Notre Dame. Brian, I don't agree with that. This is a Notre Dame team that won 4 quarters of football at Florida State, got them down to 59 minutes of football, and almost won the game. Granted, there was a penalty, a lot of other things happened. But you can't say that, if Arizona State had done the exact same thing, that they could have taken a Florida State team through 59 minutes of football and still done it, and still almost had a shot at winning. Arizona State would not have. They haven't played tough enough opponents this year. And I feel the same way about Kansas State. I don't think that, this is a Kansas State team that is 3 spots better than Notre Dame. Obviously people will say they could be close, they could, there's a voting system there, there's a system in place. But I don't think that Kansas State is a better team than Notre Dame 3 spots, and I don't think that Arizona State, who Notre Dame is playing this week, is a better team by 1 spot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the common argument is it doesn't matter how you win the games, it matters if you win the games. But if you take that, some people are taking it a little too seriously, in my opinion, for Arizona State, because let's go back a couple weeks to the USC game that they should have lost. Sorry to bring up old memories there, Mike, but
okay.
If you really think about it, them coming up like that against the USC team, them going to overtime against a Utah team, if they want to assert themselves as first in the Pac-12 South, they have to win these games by a wide margin. And Florida State didn't win by a wide margin against Notre Dame, so does that put them so many spots beneath them? I'd say no way. Exactly,
Brian. And we talked about it. It's different this year. This year, it's all human beings. There's no more computers involved. Everyone is just selecting this. It's a committee, and the committee's still probably trying to figure things out. So can't fault them a ton. But going forward, and as they start to get better at this and start to get more of a feel for these games, I gotta see Notre Dame rise up. I gotta see them. I gotta see this team. At least move up 1 or 2 spots, because this is a team, Brian, that's very good and that really could hang with your Oregons, your Auburns, your those top 4, top 5 teams.
Yeah. So Mike, it's my turn to be ranting homer, because while you ranted about your home school, I'm ranting about my home state, Colorado State University. Still on the outside looking in after such a tough week where they had a really, really big win over a divisional opponent in San Jose State. So, Mike, first we got to put down all the regular arguments. They're a Mountain West team. They don't have the strength of schedule. They already lost to Boise State. Well, there are a lot of one-loss teams that have made the top 25 from small conferences. East Carolina was a perfect example before they lost to Temple this week. But, Mike, Garrett Grayson, I told you, he's basically the Mountain West Dak Prescott. Fantastic quarterback, and this program is absolutely soaring through the rankings, and they have had big wins against teams like Boston College. So, my question is, why not? What's wrong with Colorado State?
Exactly, Brian. I think you hit it perfectly, the Mountain West Conference. I don't think the top 25 poll wants to put CSU, a Mountain West Conference team, in there. It could reflect poorly on them. I think, if you look on the surface, you want to throw maybe the 3rd or 4th best Pac-12 team in that last 25 spot, the 3rd or 4th best ACC team, because the ACC and the Pac-12 are competitive conferences. But, frankly, Brian, I'm all for the free CSU movement. They should be in the top 25 right now. They're a very good team. You got to give it up to Coach Mack up there, doing a great job, former Alabama OC. I think this is a CSU team definitely on the rise.
Yes. One thing I found very surprising when the rankings were released yesterday, how Georgia Tech has one of those last 5 spots. Now, of course, I love it as a Tech fan, but one question is, they don't really seem like they deserved it. They had their ranking. They had a really good undefeated season thus far, and then they lost to Duke, and then they fell again, and I don't think they've really had enough time to pick themselves up that they can be seen in such a high position.
Well, and it's a lack of consistency, Brian. You have to go out there, you have to win football games, and you can't win 1 game and then lose a game and then win 2 more and then lose another one. You need to show consistent success, and I think you hit it on the head. I don't think Georgia Tech has shown that consistent success, but by being in the ACC, by being in one of those major conferences, they've been rewarded. They've been given the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, especially. So, Mike, we're going to move on to our rising and falling stocks. let's start with let's keep on the note of small conference teams, and with small conference teams no longer being legitimate. Let's talk about East Carolina.
Let's talk.
Absolutely just being demoralized by a Temple team that has not had, it was just not played well this entire season. They came out big against one opponent, and that one opponent just happened to be in the top 25.
Exactly, Brian, and I think this is an East Carolina team that we saw at the beginning of the year. Very good East Carolina team. I thought they could be a Boise State type of team, really bust everything up, maybe crack that top four. Obviously that was a long shot, given the caliber of teams this year. But, their stock is just gone, and, that's what hurts you, Brian, is, you're not a major conference team. Therefore, you have to go 13 13-0, I think is the right number, 12-0 to even be considered in the top 10. Your margin for error is so slim, and that's why ECU, it's a falling stock right now because they've lost their margin for error. They've lost a game.
Yeah, definitely. So, Mike, let's talk about Temple for a second. Interesting fact about Temple. A lot of fans talk about how there's always home field advantage. Bama always wins in Bryant-Denny Stadium, so on and so forth. But Temple has a different kind of home field advantage. Over the last 2 seasons, they, of course, being a school in Philadelphia, have played a few games at the Eagles Stadium. And in those recent games, there was this past one where they upset East Carolina. And then last year where they came oh so close to knocking UCF out of the top. So that's a very, very interesting sort of turn of events for such a bad team.
It's an oddity, too. You expect a team like Alabama to win in Alabama. That's a given. You expect a team like Temple to win at Temple, on campus. You don't expect them to go to an NFL stadium and win in an NFL stadium. So it's one of those unique quirks, but, that's sports, Brian,
Yeah.
It's home field advantage is a funny thing.
Yeah, definitely. So, Mike, let's move on a little bit into the SEC.
Man.
Bad ending to a big game. Auburn, Ole Miss. Ole Miss is just plummeting right now.
Ole Miss is just on the down. They lost so much on one play, Brian. They lost their star wide receiver. Obviously, thoughts and prayers go out to him as he recovers. I want to see that guy get back on the field. Mr. Treadwell, phenomenal wide receiver. So they lost him. They lost the game. They lost the chance at an SEC title. They lost the chance to go into the playoffs. Brian, this team has lost everything.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of sad to see. It does leave a bitter taste in my mouth as an Auburn fan because, if they were going to win the game, I'd much rather just have them give them that touchdown and see if Auburn can pull off a drive. Because, granted, it was the correct call. He wasn't down. He fumbled. Auburn recovered. But it's just not good to win the games that way.
Exactly. I was at home watching the game, Brian, and I wanted them to just call it a touchdown because I want to see if Nick Marshall can drive down the field in crunch time with his season on the line and go win a football game. But, that didn't happen, obviously, and, Ole Miss loses a lot.
Yeah, so, Mike, moving on to our next falling stock, because we missed a week, Ole Miss again, because they lost to LSU. They made a very controversial call in the last play, resulted in an interception, and out of the playoff conversation.
Out of the playoff conversation, but I got to go back to this, Brian. Bo Wallace, great QB in the SEC, great guy, can throw the ball like anyone. Throw the ball like any of the best guys there. Here's what I'm thinking though. You with Bo Wallace, he's a great quarterback, Brian, but he's not as refined as your AJ McCarrons. Some of those SEC veterans. And I don't think you can. If you're Ole Miss, you can win a lot of games with Bo Wallace. He turns the ball over far too much. He didn't have the arm strength at the end of the Auburn game. Ole Miss still had 4 shots to win the game. At the very end, and they didn't throw any ball near the end zone. So. It goes back to that, Brian. Quarterbacks, especially in the SEC, are a separator because every team can run the ball. Every team has a great defense, but if you have a guy who can pass the ball really well, you're going to win the SEC.
So let's move from the world of the sad to the world of the happy. Let's talk about rising stocks, Mike. We're going to start in your conference, the Pac-12 conference. Tell us what's up.
Oregon is on fire, Brian. They are absolutely scorching opponents. Marcus Mariota has a clear mastery of that, complex spread offense that they're running there. I love what I'm seeing, Brian. Marcus Mariota, I love this guy so much. Great quarterback, the anti-Jameis Winston, so to speak. I think that this is an Oregon team, Brian, that's hot. They beat Stanford. Obviously they hadn't been able to beat Stanford, got that monkey off their back. They still have a couple more games to go, but I think right now, if you're looking for a team that's on the rise and that is absolutely just scorching, it's the Ducks.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was watching a lot of the pregame for that game, and they were all talking about, Oregon's had these great seasons, but then Stanford comes along and ruins it. Every year they've ruined it. Last year they were going to a Pac-12 North title, and then Stanford came in, took that trip to the Rose Bowl. But Marcus Mariota having absolutely none of it this year, and I think it really lasts well for his legacy, because, of course, we have names like Braxton Miller, unable to make his senior year that sort of dream year. Marcus Mariota, I mean, props to him finally getting that Stanford loss off his back, not getting a third straight year of that for this Oregon program. And now we're looking at Oregon, who finally, after so many years of really having one of the best football teams in the country, has a clear paved path to a playoff.
They control their destiny, Brian, so to speak. You know, you got to talk about that. We love the word control your destiny. But we're going to move on. Florida, mathematically speaking, their stock isn't falling. They're rising a little bit, but they're still not out of the negative right now, Brian. They beat a very good Georgia team. And if you're Alabama, Auburn, or any of those other, SEC teams, you're feeling pretty good right now because Georgia was a pretty big threat.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the SEC East has to be, in my opinion, the weirdest conference in the entirety of college football right now because you don't have a clear person or a clear team which you can say these guys are big, these guys are going to win it all. Because I mean, I think right now Mizzou is number one in the standings, but that is coming with a shutout loss to Georgia. Of course, you have Kentucky, who's still somehow up there. You have Florida, who's right up there, and then you have Georgia, who's now just been knocked beneath Florida. So I don't know what's going on, and Florida does have a chance, but honestly, I think that this is the SEC West Championship, no matter who gets in.
Oh, yeah, and it's the SEC West that's going to control this, Brian. I think, the SEC is a great conference, and right now, it's a little weird on one side of it. Not as elite as we would have thought.
Yeah, definitely. So let's move a little bit west. Let's move to the Big 12. TCU, West Virginia, big game. Frogs come out with a last-second field goal. Mike, what do you see in this team? They're on fire.
This is a TCU team, Brian, that is very good. Trayvon Boykin, not a Heisman candidate just yet. Still building his resume a little bit. He'll be there soon if he keeps winning football games. This is a TCU team that, if you're looking at it, you are feeling really good. You have a couple teams ahead of you. You have Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State. Three of the top 5 teams ahead of you are from the SEC conference, and 3 of the top 5 teams ahead of you still have to play each other. So you're looking at, a possible bunch of different scenarios. Auburn beats Alabama, Alabama beats Auburn, or Mississippi State beats Alabama, but Alabama loses to Auburn. There's a million different scenarios, but the end result, Brian, is that 2 of those teams are going to get knocked out no matter what, and that TCU moves into that 4 spot, maybe that 3 spot if they continue to play well. So if you're the Horned Frogs, you control your destiny. It looks like you maybe don't, but you just have to win out, Ryan, and you could be in that playoff.
Oh yeah, definitely. I want to give a little love to the TCU defense. I mean, they've been part of a team that's they've just given up point after point after point this season. But, in this past game against West Virginia, the big talk was turnovers because TCU's defense just forced turnovers. There's no way around it. And then also, when TCU was ready to make that comeback, when they had the offensive ability, they held so that TCU could make up those points as quickly as possible, and that a game-winning field goal was possible.
Well, that was the game that TCU needed to win, Brian. They needed to win a clutch game. They needed to win a game, when it mattered most against a very good West Virginia team. Did it. If you're TCU, Brian, I'm filling them in 4-3 spot right now.
All right, that's a very bold prediction, but Mike, going back to the Heisman for a second, I don't think Trayvon Boykin is going to be able to win the Heisman, especially with Prescott. Winston is still kind of lingering, Everett Golson. I just think what he showed at the end of the Baylor game was that when it was clutch, he kind of choked. His offense wasn't productive. Turn to the contrary, another one-loss team, Everett Golson, when his team needed a touchdown to take the game from Florida State, he led them down to the 2-yard line?
The 2-yard line, right there.
Right there. He put them right in contention, and then, a pass interference penalty lost them the game. That's not something that comes up big on the quarterback's resume, but failing to score points in the fourth quarter does, and that's why I think Trayvon Boykin, he's beyond hope for a Heisman right now.
Yeah, and it's about winning games, Brian. It's the stats are 50% of it, and it's winning big games that are the other 50% of it. And if you're Trayvon Boykin, you have all the great stats in the world. You are all Madden right now with your stats. It's nuts. But you haven't won the big games yet. Trayvon Boykin, maybe next year he'll be a Heisman contender, but I think... Brian, we got to wrap up the show a little bit. We're running out of time, so why don't you give us your shout-out?
So, Mike, this week my shout-out is not in college football, not in football, beyond the world of sports. It's a shout-out to the Apple Corporation for their new software, OS X Yosemite, completely ruining our ability to edit our episodes. So that is our reason for why these next episodes are raw and unedited, but we promise you the commentary is just as.
Still great as ever, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, I'm going to finish up. Got to give a shout out to Marcus Mariota. Love this guy so much. Anti-Jameis Winston, leading Oregon. He's got the monkey off his back. He's going to be a great pro quarterback. This guy has my undying support to the very end. Go Ducks. Go View from the U. Brian, we're going to have to wrap up.
All right, until next week, I'm Brian Heisenbottle.
And I'm Mike Carlson.
See you next week.
Call me Katy Perry.